Trying to remember the chorus to that one Spanish song. I was like, oh, I got it. Y me amas, y me hablas. Ven acá que te voy a dar una mañana y un camino que te lleva a mí. Yeah. Yeah, I was seeing this woman from Peru back in the days. By the way, my Spanish is this much. Okay, my Spanish is right here. I took Spanish for 4 years, 2 years in high school, 2 years in college. I only got up to level 2, I think it was. Pero bienvenidos. Yes, bienvenidos. Tengo muchas palabras para ti y la información en este episodio. Wait, no, I didn't even say that right. La información es muy importante para tu mente. Por eso, escúchame. Vamos a empezar. Muchas gracias. So, growing up here in Los Angeles, you can't help but interact with Latinos, and there's all different types. You know, you got personas de El Salvador, Honduras, Costa Rica, Panama, Nicaragua, Guatemala, but mostly Mexicans. Just like you go to Florida and it's mostly Cubanos, Puerto Ricanos, Dominican, and all of that, right? But here in LA, mostly Mexicans, whether they're from Jalisco, what is it, Zacatecas, Michoacan, Oaxaca, Mazatlan, a lot of different places, right? Y todo. So this interaction in my journey has been mostly positive. Okay. I would say it's been about 80% positive and 20% the rest. All right. And I understand, well, I'll just say this. It is understood that there is a love-hate relationship for melanated beings, for Black people. All over the world, there is a love-hate relationship. Now, specifically with Blacks and Mexicans, definitely a love-hate relationship. Okay, we've heard about the Black gangs versus the Mexican gangs. We've heard the discussions. You know what I'm talking about. There's the hate. It's usually the focus for the most part. But I want to focus on the love part. I want to push everything that all the stories, all the hateful stuff. I'm going to put all of that over there, focusing on the love part, because I've always thought that there is an innate connection that Mexicans have to Black people, to melanated beings. And I think it's in the bloodline. I think it goes back to history. And for those of you that know what I'm talking about, especially as it relates to the Olmec heads in Mexico, there are Black Mexicans, and I'm not just talking about those born here in the United States no. I'm talking about Blacks born in Mexico. Okay, the African slaves were down there making things happen. I'll get to that in a second. But growing up here in Los Angeles, very positive reaction. My first experience with this, I've had this throughout my life. I'm 45 now, going to be 46 in January. But my aunt, she learned Spanish. She's not from any of the Latin countries. She understands Spanish fluently. She learned the language. She ended up marrying a man from Mazatlan, had 2 children. They're no longer married, but still connected. She's still connected with the family. That's beside the point. One of the things that I found fascinating watching her, I was 10, 11. I was a young kid. And I saw the impact of her knowing Spanish. For those of you that are melanated beings that speak Spanish, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There seems to be a love there. There seems to be an admiration there. There seems to be a connection. Now, we understand that Spanish is not the native language of Mexicans. We understand this, okay? Mexicans, or the indigenous people who were already here, were forced to speak the language. Make no mistake. Don't get it twisted, okay? But looking at the connection, the fact remains she had impact. And I saw this. I saw her impact on people that worked in stores, vendors, people on the street, whoever. She speaks Spanish. They open up. They embrace her. They treat her with respect. Even the family to this day gives her a lot of admiration and respect. And that's something that I've always wondered, like, wow, I wonder how much impact we would have had back in the 80s if that became the thing. if what my aunt did became the normal thing, I wonder if that would have changed the relationship between blacks and Mexicans in the 70s and 80s when you had this influx of the immigrants coming up from Mexico, even though they were already here making their moves going back further back. But there was a big migration between the 60s and the 90s. So yeah, I saw that with my aunt. And then in the 90s as a teenager, seeing the lowriders cruising LA, going down Crenshaw, going down Sunset, or most likely Whittier Boulevard in East Los Angeles, cruising in their lowriders. The music that they would be listening to, Motown, Marvin Gaye, The Temptations, The Supremes, Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. They loved that music. Okay. And maybe some Mexicans that were living here knew about the history. They knew about the first black president, knew about certain areas of Mexico where there were Afro-Mexicans, but maybe some didn't really quite get it, but yet they still felt a connection to black people, felt a draw to want to get closer to them for some reason. There's a bloodline there. Okay. Bear with me now. I'm going to get there. Okay. Just let me land. So seeing that, and then there's this guy. I can't tell you how many Mexicans I would talk to who love this man. I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with Latinos who love this man, especially here in LA. Huge icon, okay? And to my knowledge, to my understanding, back in the 90s, he was really trying to make some moves. This guy was really trying to do a lot more than hip hop. He was trying to make moves, especially with the Latin gangs and the black gangs, to my understanding. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but that may even be related to why he was killed. He was going to shake something up. His mother was in the Black Panthers. Of course, makes sense. And then you move further, I was hired for a radio station known as Power 106. A guy by the name of Big Boy used to work there. His connection to the Latin community here in Los Angeles is astronomical. Okay, it is beyond words. I saw a man, I can't assume that he was Mexican because it's not good to assume that, but a Latin man. It was a signage, a book signing at Barnes and Noble. This happened about, I want to say 3 or 4, maybe even 6 years ago. Yeah, about 6 years ago this happened. And Angie Martinez was being interviewed by Big Boy. It was at Barnes and Noble's on the third, the Grove. That's where it was at. And so you're talking about 80 to 100 people. This Latin dude listened to Big Boy on the radio, and it was his hero. He got through some very tough times. So to meet him in person for the first time, it made him cry. He started to remember the tough times that he went through and the connection. And even though that's just entertainment buzz, connection, okay? Stay with me. Connection. There's something there. All right. And then moving further down the timeline, you go to January 26th of 2020. Someone passed away. This guy. You want to talk about impact on Latinos or just Mexicans in general? This dude right here, tremendous impact on Mexicans. So much to the point that they would gather at Staples the day of his passing and play Banda. Oh yeah, I'll put a link in the description so you can see. Okay? The impact that this dude had on Mexicans or just Latins in general, beyond words. Again, connection. He doesn't even represent their image, okay? But there's something deeper than just basketball. It's deeper than that. Believe me. So, I think about all of this stuff because I've seen this. And even me, my Spanish is this much. I know this much. But whenever I actually communicate in Spanish, okay, I notice that there's a change in posture. There's a change in the vibration, the energy that's exchanged. And I think to myself, with the friction that took place, okay, even though there was some good stuff between blacks and Mexicans here in LA, good vibes and good stuff going on. In terms of the friction, I wonder if black people, melanated beings back in the days would have said, you know what, there's an influx of these Mexicans. You know what, let's learn Spanish. Let's go ahead on and do that. Some of you already did. Some of you actually did. But if it became in mass, let's learn how to speak the language and teach these Mexicans coming over here of what happened, what really happened with the black human experience here in America. Let's educate them using their language or the language that they speak currently. Let's do that because there's a connection that goes all the way back to the African slaves that were making things happen in Mexico. And many of those descendants spread out all over the nation. Okay. And I've always kind of felt about this. Some of this information I recently discovered. Okay. It's not like I'm not an expert in these matters. I've always heard about the Omlik heads, okay, that have African features, heard about that. And I've always thought that there was a connection that's deeper that goes back to roots. We understand that melanin blood is all over the world. Make no mistake. We get it. But in terms of the Black Mexican connection, it's tremendous. And I even took Chicano studies when I was going to college, junior college, LA Trade Tech Community College. I took Chicano studies mainly to communicate with the beautiful Latin. Anyway, but there was no focus on the African influence in Mexico. Because you hear about it in the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, you hear about it in Central America, South America, even Brazil and Peru and all these other places, but you don't really hear about it being spoken of in Mexico. You know, it's not really talked about. All right. And it's important, you know, because there's a connection and there's something very powerful there, blood related. I think about someone like Pico. He was doing some big things in the 1800s. And he was blended with African. Right here, check it out. Now, you can do your own research. He was the governor of California when it was still a part of Mexico. Okay, big things in the 1800s. Perhaps his bloodline goes all the way back further to the African slaves that were down there. Okay, you can even look at the 1700s when the Spaniards brought up families from Sinaloa to help settle the pueblo of Los Angeles. When you go to Overa Street, which is right across from Union Station, okay, that's the original pueblo. That's where Los Angeles began in 1781. When you go there, there's a plaque. And on this plaque, it has the listing of these families. I think it was about 44 families. It has their names, how many members of the family, and the heritage they belong to. And guess what? I want to say either one or two or three of the families were Negros. It's listed as Negro on the plaque. Okay. And in Spanish, Negro means black. Okay. They weren't calling people African American back then, not in the 1700s. That label came later, many years later. Okay. All these characterizations and labels that they came up with in order to divide and stuff. But it's interesting when you look at that plaque and you think of the impact that, of course, descendants of potentially Gaspar Yenga. I just came across this information, but it's quite compelling. Gaspar Yenga, look it up. I'm going to put a link in the description box. He was an African slave that helped to liberate an area near Veracruz. They named this section after him. They call it the town of Yanga. Okay. You have all these other towns, El Corral, El Azufre, Chacagua. Okay. And then you have Yanga, many others. All right. There are Black Mexicans. So perhaps the descendants of Yanga, which goes back to the late 1600s, perhaps the descendants of him spread throughout the nation, trickles down, intermingling with the people that are there, blending up, right? Maybe moving over to Sinaloa. Maybe those two family members that came up to help establish the Pueblo of LA were descendants of Yanga. You see? So perhaps this innate vibration that Mexicans feel towards Black people is blood related. Okay. So just think about it. If we go back to the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, Mexicans coming in, getting the jobs, frustrating the Black folks because of the Black human experience here in Los Angeles, creating beefs. Just think if there was a teaching of this, using their language, using Spanish, learn the language, make the connection, right? You don't hear about this in school. You didn't get any of this information. But perhaps if we did more research and learned about it, or those of us that did spread that information, what kind of elevation and power would have taken place? What kind of beauty would have taken place? You see, that's where the mistake was. That's where the mistake was. And we already know the hate, but there's a love there. It's innate. It goes very deep. Now, what I'm talking about is only on a human level, because according to the spiritual level, none of this stuff matters, what I'm talking about. It's all about the Most High. But in terms of the human experience, the Black human experience, and as it relates to Mexicans, there was a missing ingredient, and it involved language and the historical sharing that was important for the connection that goes back to the African slaves. I'm going to put some links to the information there. Take a look at it, okay? Black Mexicans. It's kind of funny because my cousin gave me the jacket that has Mexico on the back. When you look at the Where I Grew Up videos, you'll see me wearing it in one of the episodes. And I remember wearing that in certain parts of Los Angeles. And, I would get a reaction from some Mexicans like, de Mexico? ¿Por qué Mexico? You know what I mean? But hey, there are Black Mexicans. No, I'm not one of them, but there are Black Mexicans, and I think it's important. It's important information to kind of share. So do your homework, share that stuff, and what a powerful connection that would be. And that's what's feared. The biggest fear is what happened in Veracruz with Gaspar Yenga, to have an African liberate the town. Yeah. Blending up with the indigenous people that were already here. Ah, yeah. Powerful stuff.